look, we're brokers. We just want to sell apartment buildings, right? And what we found was that we needed to create a process for the apartment developer or for the wannabe apartment developer to build apartments. So I think we left this on everyone's page, on everyone's table. Just flip through this, right? And so what happened was, the best ideas for your business always come from your client, right? So someone would say to us, can you do this for me? So in the case of this developer I talked about, who was very good at building 4-story product. He built, 70, 80 units. He had the crew to build it, and he was a machine. So he just said, where are the best places in southwestern Ontario for me to build this product, right? So we just did for him what we call in the very first block there, we called it an opportunities analysis, right? So if you want to build this type of product, well, you're not going to build it in downtown Toronto, right? You're probably not even going to be able to build it in the suburbs because land is too expensive, right? But you can build it in the 519, the 705, the 613, quite easily. Development charges were lower. You did mostly surface parking, right? So you came in at costs per unit of, $220,000 per unit, not $500,000 per unit, right? There's a lot more buyers to that product. Your rent is in the middle of the market, so you don't need to hit $3 or $4 per square foot rents. If something goes wrong, that $3, $4 rent's going to fall. When you're $2.25 or $2 a foot, there's not that far for it to fall. The older products are $1.50, $1.60, right? So people just come to us and say, we want to be in the apartment business. Where should we be, right? And then we turn that into land brokerage. So one of our land broker guys is sitting up here, Brad McGill. Brad does mainly student housing, but our clients come to us and say, I want to buy land. So we'll just go out and find them the land. That's maybe 5 or 10% of our clients. The majority, 95% of our clients, come to us in the second phase here where they actually want to do a project feasibility study. So they've got a piece of dirt that they've either owned, want to buy, or have under contract, right? And there we answer those questions. Should you build? What should you build? How much can you charge? What's the depth of the market? How much money will you make if you're going to build it, right? And those reports are fairly comprehensive. We'll show you an example of one, like a similar one, right, that we've done. And then we go ahead and do that study. It takes 6 to 8 weeks, and then we deliver that to the developer. Now, oftentimes, that the developer will give that report to the bank, but not necessarily in that exact format. Because, we might say to the developer, look, you should consider option A with these many amenities, option B, option C. And he says, okay, I'm going to pick option B. Well, we'll then take the report and write it with just option B in it, as opposed to it.
To give to his landlord.
Yeah. And if the developer's done a feasibility study with somebody else or he's done it himself, we usually say, well, let's just hang on to your feasibility study. We don't want to know the results, right? And if our feasibility study matches what you say you're going to build, well, good. I mean, you spent 20 grand, but at least you know that what we think and what you think is aligned. You've got a professional opinion on this. If our opinions are different, and they often are, we're going to have a very interesting discussion, right? And so some of the mountains that we'll die on is for a washer and dryer. Guys say, well, no, I want to get the laundry income. Like, you're not going to have a Class A apartment building if you don't have an in-suite washer dryer. Like, it really just is that simple, right? But yet, we've seen a number of buildings built without in-suite washer dryer. So that's what we do there. And then once the report is done, we do the detailed financial analysis. It's not something we could do here today, but we're happy to show you the spreadsheet model that we go through. It's fairly complex, right?
Yeah.
And go through that, right? So then we get to the first 2 blocks. Then project financing, we made a lot of good friends who are lenders. Mark Kay, who was doing the introduction here at CFO Capital. Where's Ryan? Ryan Bazell? Where is he? From Centurion. He was here. Anyways, he's in the back there. But so look, there's lots of good lenders out there. But the guys who actually have done apartment deals and who are apartment owners understand the business. You're not educating their lender, right? Now, it's becoming less and less like that. Like 5 years ago, you really had to, everyone had to hold everyone's hands because nobody kind of knew what they were doing, right? Now there have been more buildings built, and lenders are understanding it better. And so oftentimes that client comes to us via his lender just saying, get this report, right? And so on. So we help with people to just understand, meet financiers, and put deals together that way. Because we're, fairly out there, a lot of people come to us and say, look, I've got land, but I need a developer, right? Or I've got land and I can develop, but I need money. So we'll just put together joint venture deals, and then we'll sort of join the team and continue on like that, right? So that's the second one. The third one is ongoing consulting, and there are several clients in here so once you make the decision to build, you need someone to help you advise your architect, your designer, and all the people who are involved in the development process, right? So what we bring to it is that sort of end view from the resident's point of view, right? Let me give you an example of things that people just forget to do today, especially if you've got a building with young people in it, is packages. You will be overwhelmed with packages at Christmas time. Your superintendent is collecting them, knocking on doors, It's crazy, right? And it's only going to get worse. There are systems you can buy where there are automated lockers, right? Where, you know, UPS comes up, they've got a code, they put in the package, they send the resident an email. The resident has 3 days to pick it up, right? And voila, you now have what's almost an amenity for your resident, as opposed to what can become a real problem, you know, at night, at Christmas time, right?
Online shopping.
Right. So we'll just sit there. We'll just sit on the design team and help them design a better building. And sometimes it's a pretty long discussion, because the developer will come to us saying, I want to build 80% twos and 20% ones, and we think you should be building the opposite. Oh. That's not going to happen. That discussion is not going to happen in one meeting. It's an understanding of, in fact, I might not even say I think you're completely wrong, right? Because it's just such a hard thing. That it worked on a condominium, it works somewhere else, and you know, something else. But it takes a little bit of time for someone to understand it. Certainly, sometimes talking to another developer that we've worked with who will confirm it with him, is important, and things like that. So that's the sort of stuff that we do during this process. Yeah, the ongoing consulting. We just sit on the design team, and it's a 1 or 2 year process. There's a lot of work up front, right, to get to sort of when there's the hole in the ground, right? Once the construction occurs, there's not that much work. And then once we start approaching lease up, there's a ton of work to do to get the building leased up. So the next step would be the marketing plan. And you really do need to have a detailed written marketing plan. You don't need to spend as much money as you do on a condominium development. You know, you're spending a 5-6% or whatever the case is, right, of the total cost of the project on sales fees and marketing. It's a much smaller number than that for the apartment business. The person doesn't get paid as much. And it's an easier sale to make. The person's not putting their life savings in one building. They're just signing a 12-month lease, right? But it is a process, and it needs to be professionally managed and done. And then we get to the initial lease up, where we just come in and do the lease up for them. So we'll come in, hire and train the staff, manage them. And then if the owner owns the building, we say to the owners, you really just constantly have to be raising the rent. Because, you know, in that first year of building a building, let's say your rent is $1,500 and you've got 300 units to rent out. You're under a lot of pressure to get full, right? The last thing you want is to be going into your 13th month and then having people turn over at 30% a year and now have old and new apartments at the same time, right? So you may do whatever you've got to do to get those first 300 units leased up, right? And you might have leased them up a little too cheap. And you're also going to be a lot smarter now. You know which units went first, what views were better, and you can start adjusting your prices, you know, and things like that. So there's an ongoing asset management of this property that needs to happen, and it's critical it happens, because your development yield on apartment isn't going to be so large, right, that you can't afford to do this and leave chips on the table. But as we know in the apartment business, you know that time is really apartment owners' best friend. The people who built apartments in the 60s and 70s are probably some of the richest real estate people in the country, for sure, right? And those apartments that cost, you know, $10,000, $15,000, $20,000 in the 60s are now worth $200,000, right? Wow. And it's interesting, one of our clients was a long-term developer, said that, you know, in the 60s, he built one building where it cost $11,000 per unit, and he built another that cost $20,000 per unit. One was a wood 3-story walk-up, and one was a high-rise, you know, on the waterfront. And if you look at the difference in value today of those two buildings, right? So quality pays, right?
For sure.
Yeah. And so we just move through those steps with the client, and then on the sale. It's interesting. A lot of guys start building apartments and then say they're never going to sell them, but they do. They just do. I mean, there's a good profit there. They're transactional by nature because they're a condo developer. And we've sold about 22 new apartment buildings.
Wow.
And a lot of those, almost all of them, we were the consultant doing the feasibility study, right? And just sort of stayed through with the client. And I'll show you a little bit later on. We've got 3 apartment deals that sort of started 2 years ago, and I'll sort of walk through each deal and what the sort of mechanics were behind it in terms of what made it work, and you know, just what was the juice in the deal. Okay.
I think we skipped one, which is asset management, and that pertains to older assets, maybe.
Yeah. You know, the best deal, the best apartment deal, the one that always pencils out the best, is the one where there's an existing apartment building and there's excess land. Okay, and I would call that, back in the 60s and 70s, we built these, there was some architectural style, I don't know what it was called, but it was like, I called it the tower in the park. So there's this apartment tower and there's this piece of dirt beside it, right? And the parking ratio back then was, 1.5 to 1 or 2 to 1 or something like that. And now transit is close by and there's retail close by and there's schools close by. And a lot of this parking is sitting there empty. You'd be surprised how many high-rises in the downtown core, the older 1960s and 70s apartments, have an entire floor of underground parking that's vacant, right? So let's say you're lucky enough to own one of these things. You got 100 units in the tower in the park, right? You go to zoning and you're allowed to build another 100 units, right? Next door to it. So you get the advantage now is that the land is free, right? I mean, it's got a value to it that you're going to put into your pro forma for your lender, but you're not writing a check out of your pocket, right? You've got 100 parking spots next door, 50, 60, 70, maybe only going to put in one level of underground parking, put some service parking. And then you've also got a superintendent next door. Like staffing costs are pretty significant, right? So of all the deals we've seen, intensifying a site with a twin building beside it. Now, it's not going to be a twin building because that's a 1960 model with a galley kitchen and, metal balconies and all that kind of stuff. You're going to build at least something that complements the building, right? So I would redo the lobby of the old apartment in the same motif as the new one. What I'm trying to do is tie the two buildings together and have the old building benefit from the things that are going to go in the new building, right? And now I can put amenity space in the new building and let the people in the old building use it. So I get to double up on the amenity space.